All right, folks, it is 10 o'clock, Thursday the 19th, and City Council is going to resume its Mayor's proposed FY23 Budget Summer of Love Tour. We have on the docket today the Municipal Court to start us off. That's on page 287 in your hymnal. Then at 11 to 11:30, we have the Solicitor's Office. 11:30 to 12, Public Defender's Office. We will break for lunch. We will resume at 1 to hear from law, and we'll wrap up at 2 with the Department of Aviation. For the listening public, an electronic copy of the budget book and all presentations can be found under the proposed FY23 budget tab on the Finance Exec page of Council's website. I want to make sure our tens of viewers on Channel 26 have the ability to access that. And I'm Howard Shook. It's my privilege and great honor to be sitting in for Chairman Wan, who at the moment is doing other business. Mr. Antonio Lewis is in the House. We have Councilmember Mary Norwood, Councilmember Matt Westmoreland. Other members will be cycling in and out as their busy schedules permit. And so, without further ado, Chief Judge, take it away, introduce your colleagues.
Good morning. Chairman Shook, members of council. It is a pleasure to be here this morning to make the fiscal year 2023 presentation on behalf of the Municipal Court of Atlanta. I am Chief Judge Chris Portis. By way of introduction, sitting to my left is the Court Administrator, Chief Clerk of Court, Rashida Davis. To my right, the Deputy Chief Clerk of Court, So Young Yoon. And on the opposite end, the Deputy Court Administrator, Brandy Reeves. It's a pleasure to be here. We look forward to making this presentation and providing whatever information that we can to answer the questions that you might have. Morning. Right. Moving into the presentation by way of information, the general court function for the Municipal Court of Atlanta. Our core purpose is to provide a fair and impartial forum for cases to be decided and for all parties, including residents of the city, to participate and be heard. To hear cases regarding the laws passed by this body that are specific to the municipal corporation, to provide attention to matters directly concerning the city and its communities, and to require accountability for conduct that occurs inside the jurisdictional limits of the city of Atlanta, and to attempt to manage those outcomes. By way of information, for calendar years 2019, which was the year immediately preceding the COVID pandemic, and calendar year 2021, just some basic case information for a snapshot of the volume of cases that the Municipal Court of Atlanta will hear in any 12-month period. For the largest volume of cases in the traffic category, and that averages someplace between 100 to 150,000 cases every year. Obviously, we hear a substantial volume of ordinance violations. This is in both the housing and code arena as well as the ordinance-based criminal conduct. These cases are criminal in nature and account for anywhere between 10 and 25,000 cases per year, and then everything else is spread out across the different case types, such as miscellaneous misdemeanor cases that might be state law criminal based, misdemeanor drug violations such as possession or use of drug-related objects, and then serious traffic cases, which will include those cases involving accidents and other offenses included with an accident like hit and run. So there you see an average caseload between 2019 2021 at about 151,000. As we move through the slides, we'll take a look at what we're seeing as we prepare to close out the last 60 days of the current fiscal year. The court is made up of 10 full-time judges. Those judges appear on the municipal ballot cycle with council and the mayor. The average caseload per judge is 520 cases per week, and the average number of cases closed per week is right around 2,300. Moving on to the next slide, further information about how the court is organized and structured with the division of cases as well as caseload. As previously stated, the general traffic case volume makes up the biggest portion, and there are 5 judges assigned to hear those cases 5 days a week. That is Judge Jackson, Judge Gaines, Judge Baker, Judge Bay, and Judge Mann. There is the in-custody division that operates 6 days a week, Sunday through Friday. That is presided over by Judge Stephanie Davis, who is a former Chief Magistrate for the Fulton County Magistrate Court and brings a great deal of experience and perspective to the in-custody and first appearance division. That primarily is a calendar that considers bond and pretrial release for those individuals who have to see a judge before they're eligible to be released. The criminal and aggravated traffic division is presided over by Judge Ward. This division primarily hears cases for misdemeanor criminal offenses, including minor drugs, drug possession of drug-related objects, shoplifting, disorderly conduct, fighting, hit and run, fleeing and attempting to elude, and street racing related conduct, including individuals who have been cited for racing or very high rates of speed. Next is the Housing and Code Division, which hears all matters concerning the residential and commercial code, all of the zoning violations, all of the permits and licenses issued by the City of Atlanta, and any violations related to those types of cases. The Driving Under the Influence Division hears all cases regarding DUI, including alcohol and drug. And last but not least is the Restore Atlanta Division, which is the community court division where 3 courtrooms or 3 judges feed cases primarily into the system. Judge Graves, who hears all matters, both criminal and traffic, for any individual who is 21 years of age or younger. Judge Ward with the criminal cases, sending individuals for alternative programming as a part of the resolution of their criminal case, and myself for cases that involve homeless individuals who are actively enrolled in our homeless court division. Next slide, please. Moving on from the case subject matter division and judge breakdown, this slide displays the how the court administration, the actual day-to-day operations of the court, is managed and broken down. The chief judge and the court administrator are positions established in the charter for the City of Atlanta. By the charter, the chief judge is selected by a majority vote of the number of full-time judges, as is the position of court administrator and chief clerk. Both the chief judge and the court administrator serve in that capacity until there is a vote by a majority of the judges to move in a different direction. Under the court administrator fall all of the front office and day-to-day operations of the court, including all employees. The administration of the court is responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operation of the court, including employee performance, all court departments, the use of court facilities, the management of court resources, and operational logistics. Court administration is headed by myself and the court administrator. The administration is broken down into 2 sides, the court administrative side, the deputy clerk side. The clerk side primarily handling, in a simple terms, the paper filings, the finance, the budget. the court administrator side handling the clerk's office, pretrial warrant division, and courtroom operations, and the human resources and quality control portions reporting directly to the court administrator. Obviously, for just information purposes, the clerk's office is the department that you file and get information from. It is also the official repository under state law for all court records. Courtroom operations is just that. Those are the individuals who work in the courtroom, staff them on a day-to-day basis to handle the caseload and move individuals and cases in and out. That department is comprised of 31 full-time individuals. The target for the court would be 36. Data management, those are the individuals who are responsible for taking in all of the physical citations, taking the information on the citations and physically putting that in the case management system so that individuals can access cases electronically, both on the courtroom side but also from the general public standpoint. Pretrial and warrants handle the pretrial portion of criminal histories and coordinating with probation for individuals who are out on pretrial release. The warrants portion is self-explanatory, handling the processing and entry of warrants and maintenance of warrants upon GCIC. The Quality Control Division handles just that, making sure that information is maintained inside of the court's official repository accurately, and they perform regular audits to ensure that budget and finance are obvious. And Restore Atlanta is the Community Court Division. Safety and security, those are the individuals who maintain and secure the courthouse. Right now, that's at 14. Ideal number for that is 22. We utilize retired Atlanta police officers to staff the courtrooms as well as the front entrance for the primary security during day-to-day functioning times. Moving forward to the next slide is just some basic information on where we are in the current fiscal year, beginning July 1st of 2021 up through April the 30th of 2022. As we move through the tail ends of COVID operations and look forward to returning to normal operations, you can see the case volume starting to increase moving from December into March and April. As we closed out April, we had received just over 12,000 new traffic cases in just that month alone. That rate has continued to remain steady over the weeks in the month of May as well. We're running a closure rate of new cases over closed cases at about 85%. That is an optimal number where we would like to see the traffic cases closed to keep them from aging. That percentage does not factor in the cases that are currently being closed that are in FTA status. Factoring those cases in, that number jumps to about 105%. Moving forward to the next slide is a similar breakdown for criminal cases received for fiscal year 2022, year to date, beginning July 1st, 2021 through April 30th of last month. The criminal closure rate is 60%, with just over 7,000 cases filed during that period. It's not uncommon for this closure rate historically to track lower than the traffic cases simply because of what's entailed in getting these cases closed. Oftentimes these involve individuals who are not only a part of alternative sentencing but also on probated sentencing, and that causes these cases to remain open. They're a little bit more intensive with monitoring and court appearances over time. Moving forward to the next slide, simply a comparison for a 12-month calendar year period, 2019 again versus calendar year 2021, just a comparison of where those numbers look like pre-COVID versus a COVID year. Looking at those, they are off just about 60,000 cases, which in light of operations in general and the scale back is not terribly uncommon, but in relation to the cases coming in and actually getting closed, we are on target with where that should be, even in comparison to a pre-COVID year. Looking forward to the next slide is a metric that we have always tracked, but becomes even more important with public health concerns with COVID. The billed and entry total for the fiscal year to date is just short of 234,000 individuals. The monthly totals tracking just above 23,000. As we move forward to accommodate those individuals, increasing the calendar sizes for all caseloads to be able to not only accommodate more cases on the docket, but allow individuals to come in and resolve those cases as close to issuance of the citation as possible. Right now, the docket capacities have been pushed back up to 100 per calendar. The pre-COVID levels were 125, so we're looking as we move into the summer, watching the public health data to return that to its pre-COVID level moving into the end of the summer of this year. Looking forward to the next slide is a snapshot of just the alternative programming for the fiscal year to date, July 1st through April the 30th, and the alternative programs for the Municipal Court of Atlanta in the Department of Restore Atlanta, which is our community court division. Programs are Teens Learning Control, Restorative Justice, Community Service Program, Homeless Court, and the Pretrial Intervention Program, which is run by the Solicitor's Office, and that they have direct control over the cases that go in under state law. Teens Learning Control is just that. It is a program that affords younger individuals the opportunity to learn about traffic laws. There are classes that they take as a part of alternative resolution with an aim towards them making better decisions and having more awareness of the impact of coming into the court system by virtue of the conduct on the roads. The idea is to make them more responsible, better drivers. Restorative Justice is an alternative sentencing program for individuals who have been charged with certain criminal offenses, who are otherwise first-time offenders. It helps them be able to resolve the case with a dismissal, but it also helps them be able to avoid the consequences of a criminal history and at the same time hopefully preventing future conduct. And then the Homeless Court program is a program that allows individuals to be connected with resources as a mandatory part of their case resolution. We have nonprofit partners that allow us to send individuals for short-term housing, minor medical treatment, dental care, substance abuse, mental health evaluations, those type of things to hopefully get them in a position where they can break the cycle of homelessness, but at the same time be able to resolve that case, and in addition to any other open cases that they may have at the court, are also resolved as a part of exiting out of the program, so that they literally leave the program, leave the court system with a clean slate, and hopefully not being re-entangled with the justice system solely because they had open matters that were unresolved. Just looking at those numbers over the fiscal year to date, there have been a total of just short of 45,000 community service hours done, 11,000 directly with the Restore Atlanta program, 33,600 for individuals who have been placed on probation as a part of their court resolution. We do allow individuals to actively complete their community service at the courthouse, either on the inside or on the outside, walking around, picking up items, helping move files, those type of things for individuals who would like to, as a part of their community service, also be engaged with the court system. For the referrals to Restore Atlanta, total for the fiscal year, just short of 1,300 individuals have been referred. So far this fiscal year, there have been 265 graduates of the TLC program, 116 out of Restorative Justice, and 46 individuals enrolled in the Homeless Court program. As we move further beyond COVID, of course, a lot of these things were program opportunities that were in person, and in person really drove a lot of the successful completion and compliance. So as we move a little bit closer to normal operations in general, being able to resume a lot of these things in person has really helped drive the success of those who have been participating in these programs. Moving forward to the next slide gets into the financial data that's a part of our responsibility to report on. While I I don't operate the court system with an eye towards collecting revenue. I will turn it over to the court administrator to at least provide some basic information about the receipts that have been remitted to the City of Atlanta over the last 5 years.
Good morning. I will go over slide number 10, which addresses the statutory surcharges. The official code of Georgia and certain city ordinances delineate specific funds that will assess a percentage of a fine for any particular case. There are the Peace Officer Training Fund, the Peace Officer Pension, the Crime Victims Emergency Fund, Indigent Defense Fund. The monies collected there go to representation for individuals who are not able to afford an attorney. Crime lab fee, Drug Abuse Treatment and Education Fund, Indigent Defense Application Fee that also supports funding for individuals who are not able to afford an attorney. Driver's Education Training Fund, Brain and Spinal Injury Trust Fund, Georgia State Patrol Motorcycle Unit, Local Crime Victims Assistance Fund. There's a municipal Victim Witness Fund. This actually supports the City of Atlanta's victim witness operation at the court, and the Department of Corrections. This is a 5-year snapshot of the remittance to those funds for a total of $22 million, just $0.7 million. The next chart below it addresses the funds that are collected that are remitted directly to the general fund, and is just a little bit over $100 million, $106 million that went directly to the general fund from the municipal court over the last 5 years. There's a slight decline in the revenue during the fiscal year that we experienced COVID, but other than that, they're pretty on track and target. The next slide addresses the budget and our budget considerations. We have a year-over fiscal year comparison to our current budget and the proposed budget for FY23. But I do want to highlight some of the municipal court's critical needs moving beyond our current fiscal year. We requested funding to increase and keep our pay competitive for our frontline workers. We conducted a survey of other courthouses in DeKalb, Fulton County, and Cobb in conjunction with the Human Resources Department to assess our frontline workers and the salary that they were receiving. And as you can see at the start of July 1, the average salary for our workers was $34,000. Based on that review of competitive salaries with other courthouses, we were able to adjust their salary to at least remain a bit on par and competitive with the other counties and city courthouses. At today, the average frontline salary is $41,600. The next item is returning our workforce to its capacity. We want to return to at least 155 for our head count. At the start of this year, January 7th, we had 101 workers. Right now, we have 131. Of course, we want to get that number increased to make sure that the workload is spread evenly and that we're not burning our employees out who have been with us, obviously, during COVID by not filling these vacancies. The next item is funding to replace end-of-life critical equipment. We utilize an audio-video system in all of our courtrooms to capture the record. This is for trials, for pleas that are taken. The law requires that we capture the record. Courthouses can do that in two ways. They can have a system like we do that records audio and video in each courtroom, or they can utilize a court reporter, and that would be a court reporter for every courtroom. We operate 10 courtrooms. The average salary of a court reporter is about $65,000 a year. Cost-benefit analysis, it's better just to operate a system. However, our system is 20 years old, and our vendor will no longer service these end-of-life parts. The average implementation for a system is about $300,000 to $350,000, and that would be a one-time cost. The second item for critical court replacements would be some ADA upgrades. We do have some ADA accessibility concerns with the building that we feel should be addressed and remedied. The last item is funding to increase Restore Atlanta, which is our alternative sentencing court program. And of course, we have our homeless court. We perform competency evaluations. We have clinical professionals. These are all working in concert to help provide alternative sentencing for some of the constituents that are eligible that come through our court. And I believe that is it. Thank you.
We've been joined by Byron Amos. That concludes the presentation. All right, Mr. Hillis.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Chief Judge and court staff. A few questions. You kind of touched on it in your part of the presentation, Chief Judge, but where is the court right now with getting the personnel, judges, and those that have been cited to appear in court back 100% in person? Where are we now, and when will we be back to full operations within the court?
When you say cited and getting them back into court, you're speaking of arrest warrants?
No, I'm just talking about, you said you haven't resumed full operations yet, so to what extent are we still virtually hearing cases? Is everything staff and those that have been cited to come to court, is it 100% in person?
Yes, so the entire time, the only thing that we ran that was virtual were the individuals who were in custody at the jail, so that the jail staff did not have to move those group of people over. That's the only part that was virtual. Since October of 2020, we've been fully operational, so individuals who were cited had to appear in court. What we did early on was we ran more calendars every day with fewer numbers of positions on those calendars to accommodate for the volume. As we move forward, we will increase the size of the calendars and go back to 2 primary arraignment calendars every day. So the general answer is we have been fully operational. The only difference is trying to reduce the footprint of individuals who are having to wait to get into certain areas. We had spatial guidelines, of course, early on. We have rolled those back. The last piece is simply increasing the calendar sizes back to the pre-COVID level, which is 125. Since January, we've been operating a 100 position calendar. So individuals coming into court, that part has been in place for some time. What we do is we balance the calendars to make sure that it's evenly spread out. The way that we do that is when tickets come into the court, they're immediately entered. If a ticket is delivered today, it will be in the system within 48 hours for you or anybody else to be able to check. The data entry team then sets those cases based on numbers to calendars and to days, mails out to the defendant an actual court notice that also not only includes the court date and time, but also has a QR code inside the envelope that they can literally scan, and it will automatically take them to the case search feature on the court's website so they can pull up the case as well. That's been helpful for people to be able to answer the case, questions about their case. So in a nutshell, everything is fully operational. It's been such. It's just a matter of increasing the number of individuals that we will have in the courtroom at any given time moving forward.
Thank you for that. Looking at some of the line items in the budget, see that extra help is going from $41.5K last year to $633, which even, FY22 was probably an off year, but even going back to previous fiscal years, that's a over 100% increase. So what all is that extra help budget paying for?
The extra help amount was increased. We asked for increased funding to get the positions back to 155. some of that money was agreed upon to be given. It was added to the extra help line item instead of the regular full-time salaries line item. So regardless, we're going to be trying to use that to get the workforce back to 155. We have really no driving need for quote-unquote extra help, but we do have a substantial number of positions that we would like to get filled to, one of the things that 101, you look at that same sheet, 101, during COVID, obviously, you got people getting sick, for instance. Well, we were running staggered schedules so that when somebody did get sick, it wouldn't shut the entire department down, and we could isolate individuals. Once you get down to a number like 101, I mean, literally, you get to situations where you're running a clerk's office with 2 people when there's a demand of at least 7 or 8 to be able to fully run the office. So that's why we're really trying to get that number to 155. We kind of have that down to a science. Looking back at the slide number 4, where you have that bottom portion of that chart, which is the current head count versus ideal head count, kind of gives you an idea of what we would do with that money to get those numbers back to 155 and where we actually need people. You take a situation like data entry where we have 14, we want to get back to 20. We know that it takes just under 2 minutes to be able to enter a handwritten citation into the case management system, that is taking all of the information, driver's license number, person's name, date of birth, address, charging information, get that from the citation into the data management system. It's about 2 minutes for a person to transpose that information. We also have down to a science about how many citations an individual can reasonably put in an 8-hour day. It is a very demanding and repetitive task. So that's why we want to get that number, for instance, up to 20. But we'll be using that money in the extra help line item to get those full-time salaried people on board.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the FTEs and the vacancies in a minute, but given I guess, what I perceive as a backlog in cases due to the pandemic, to what extent does the court rely on ad hoc judges to process through these cases? You mentioned you have 10 full-time judges, but
sure,
the capacity.
Yeah, we use them almost daily because we have a portion of the full-time judges who are more seasoned, if you will. When those folks have illness or otherwise having to go to appointments or taking days, naturally we use a part-time judge to come in and fill in for that person. But also we will run extra calendars from time to time. If we have a 30-day period where the volume of cases is very high, we want to get those cases scheduled. We don't want to spread them out 6 or 8 months. The case then gets to be unseasonable. The likelihood that a person appearing begins to decline. So we'll run an extra court calendar from time to time. We will use that part-time work to be able to accommodate for those calendars. So we use it. Right now we have 3 part-time judges. The charter calls for the same number of full-time, so we could actually increase that. The daily pay for that is $250. So it's for those folks who are in full-time practice of law also. I mean, they obviously, with their attorney life, have to take those priorities, but also, I mean, the pay is, not... It's been that way for about 20 years. So, I mean, that is an impediment from time to time, but we do use it to be able to move the cases forward. We also use that work on Sundays when we run the Sunday jail calendar as well.
And what percentage of cases, if you say you have 13 total judges, I think that works out at about 2.5%. So what percentage of the total cases are the ad hoc judges hearing? And what types of cases? Is it just first appearances, or does it spread across the spectrum of cases y'all hear?
If they're filling in for somebody because they're out sick, then obviously whatever that person's court calendar is, they would hear those cases. If we're running an extra calendar, more often than not, that's going to be a traffic calendar. Obviously, the Sunday jail calendar, but the traffic calendar is the most common case type that we would use for part-time fill-in work on. The numbers really count for less than 2%. Just off the top of my head, if we look at a case volume of about 150,000 to 200,000 a year pre-COVID, the numbers on slide 2 are related solely to the full-time judge usage. So that's 10 full-time judge, 520 new cases per week, and 2,300 cases closed per week. So 98% of that volume is full-time work. But even in that 2%, I mean, it's a critical part of being able to continue to get cases in, get them heard. Obviously, somebody being out, for instance, we don't want people coming in and you got to be told that, you know, there will be no court today because we didn't have anybody to cover the calendar. So we try to work around that. Even our full-time judges, for instance, will have to cover for somebody right now to make sure that that continues smooth.
And then just from my own knowledge, are those ad hoc? Is that ad hoc pay in the regular salaries, or is that in? Because there's nothing reflected in part-time.
Yeah,
is that an extra help?
That is done by voucher, and that's going to be in our purchases and contracted services.
Gotcha. So, is there a current backlog of cases? Just because, you know, when I'm looking at, you know, I'm big on code enforcement, of course. So when I previously, before the pandemic, you know, if a case went to a citation and went to municipal court, you know, we'd see it then, you know, maybe a month or two. But then cases right now that are getting scheduled for court or many months out.
Right.
So where are we with what I perceive as a backlog, and how long will it take us to get back on a good schedule?
Unlike most places, we don't have a backlog in the purest form of the definition, meaning we don't have a set of cases that are waiting to be scheduled or have never been seen. The only thorn in my side, at least looking at the case demographics, are obviously those ones that have gone into failure to appear status over the last 24 months. But as far as pure backlog of having cases waiting to be heard, those are non-existent. If you do see cases that are waiting to be heard, oftentimes it may have something to do with when the case might have been dated on the actual citation itself. If a citation is issued and that court date is 90 or 120 days out, we will keep the court date that we schedule for the person to come in for arraignment by notice relatively around the same time that is on the citation. Our goal is to give a person at least 33 days worth of notice, but if the extension is longer than that based on what's on the citation, ordinarily we're not going to push it up just because we found it caused a lot of confusion. I know that with the code folks, there was some ramp up with them kind of returning back to just regular operations because of some of the constraints in their own department. There were a lot of lateral transfers out of certain code arenas to others. There were a lot of folks who left. I know that for a fact on a daily basis. I don't see a lot of the folks that I was used to seeing prior to the pandemic. So I know that has had an impact as well, as that, you know, even on the pipeline to getting cases to the court, the pandemic had an impact on those folks' operation.
One quick question and one more about the vacancies. On the end-of-life critical court components that was mentioned, the camera system and the ADA, is that reflected in your budget or in Deem's budget? And what is the timeline for those improvements?
The court recording equipment would be something that would be reflected directly in the court's budget. The ADA issues would possibly be reflected in part in court, part in Deem's budget. We did work with Deem. Deem worked with us to take on the expense of some very needed accommodations over the last 12 months. Those accommodations were almost emergency, if you will, and we need to revisit some of those to kind of make sure that they're kept up to par and maintain where they should be under federal regulations. So that's it.
And what was the timeline for both of those?
We would ideally like the court recording software that we use to create the record. I mean, it's, simply put, is shot. The equipment is failing. We're getting ready to be at a point where if it fails, I mean, obviously that's going to be a major operational problem. But it's 20 years old, and just literally within the last 10 days, the vendor who installed it, who's still been servicing it, told us outright, we can't service this anymore. The parts are old. We can't Band-Aid it anymore, and y'all gonna have to do something. That amount is not in the budget, and we are at a point where it will have to. Something's gonna have to give with it.
So what is the cost of that?
This average about $350,000. We've quoted several different vendors who do that for courthouses, but that's the ballpark of what will be required to upgrade that, totally replace it for all 12 courtrooms.
So $350K for all 12 courtrooms? Yep. Okay. We'll work on that. You mentioned, or your spreadsheet mentions you have 131 on your workforce today. The FTEs reflected in the budget book show 185 FTEs, so 54 vacancies. Are those 54 vacancies funded in this budget fully or partially or not at all? Maybe finance?
Partially. So the plan here with the question you asked earlier in regards to the extra help positions, that in total funds the operations of about 155 people. So it's roughly 30 or so that are unfunded positions.
All right, thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Good morning. I wanted to ask about the community service hours. I know that years ago, people would be required to do community service, but they just wouldn't do it. How is that overseen now? Do we have someone who makes sure that if you're out cleaning up a park, that you actually have to clean up the park? What kind of process do you have in place?
Yes, so in order to, your community service has to be verified first and foremost. So that's done on the front end. If you're not going to do it at the court and you've been given that leeway, everyone's not given the leeway to do it wherever they want to. It's really dependent on the case, what the judge is actually sentencing. If you are in a situation where you have the organization, the location where you are doing it has to be approved first. On the back end, when you bring in that information, that also has to be confirmed. That has to happen before your case is allowed to be closed. For individuals who, for instance, are on probation and given a part of community service, that community service is directly overseen by the probation department. In this case, we contract with a vendor, Judicial Correction Services. They're the same vendor who provides misdemeanor probation services for the county. They're very solid, overseen by the Georgia Department of Community Supervision, and they make sure that for those individuals that to a T the community service is completed. There is a set parameter on where you can do it, and that's also monitored and verified. Obviously, if you do it at the court, we're going to know you did it because you're going to be with a department actually completing that community service. So as far as being able to, put something on letterhead or have your cousin answer the phone, those days are done, because if you're going to be giving community service, there's going to be a vetting process for it, and for most of the cases, you're going to end up back in front of the judge to close the case out. It's not an automated process where you just go to a window and turn in community service.
Okay, thank you. I, like Chairman Hillis, care a lot about blight and getting rid of the blight in town. I know that we've got the new law at the state that the state legislature passed several years ago, saying that we could take those properties, and I have mentioned that to the solicitor. Tell me what the process is right now on, and I did with my colleagues pass an ordinance that said that each council member could give up to 5 properties that they cared about. And I did talk with the solicitor's office and send that information over to them so we can start addressing the worst of the worst. So tell me what y'all can do to help that process along and get the city in better shape.
The first most important piece of that is obviously the individuals who represent the interests of the city of Atlanta in the court process is the solicitor's office. They have the ability to file the actions, particularly state law nuisance complaints in court, and the court will be prepared to hear those cases to finality as we always have been. Those cases are scheduled within 45 days, and we will make sure the resources are available, that there's a forum for that to actually happen. Currently, the presiding judge for code enforcement is the sole hearer of those, but that's based on volume of cases. Obviously, you look at slide number 3, I mean, traffic is the highest volume, so there are more judges dedicated to it. So my commitment would be to anybody is that if the need is there for there to be more resources, we will make that happen. So far in calendar year 2022, 2 of those nuisance complaints have been filed, both of which have been brought to finality. So there's definitely the ability to handle the caseload and to handle additional cases if they're brought to court, and we'll make sure that they move through the system as state law requires.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Amos.
Thank you. Actually, my counterpart just started the questions, and all of mine is about housing code, as you probably already know. I'm going to page 10, though. The different surcharges and remissions, are there different formulas, or because I see various ranges of funds? So are there different formulas for different funds?
Yes, the short answer to that is absolutely, and we have nothing to do with those amounts. I mean, it's not. We make sure that in the clerk's office in our Department of Finance that the appropriate amounts are, of course, attached to the cases, but we have no oversight or ability to adjust upward or downward. They are either state law set or they are city ordinance set.
Thank you. Where do the fines that ultimately make it through your court for housing violations, where do they fall? General fund, or I don't see a fund on here?
All fines that we collect at the court are remitted to the general fund. We do not have any ability to appropriate or to delineate where those funds go. We remit them to the city of Atlanta on a rolling basis.
Okay. And last question is, talk about your failure to appear process in the terms of this budget, but along the lines of failure to appear when it comes to housing code violations.
Specifically, resources directed to failure to appear or the process itself?
Ultimately, and we talked about this in another committee, people who are failure to appear are the most egregious in this city. We might well call them environmental terrorists, the way they're holding our community hostages. So I'm trying to figure out through our failure to appear process, how do we start to hold people accountable?
Right. The general answer is, just like at the council subcommittee meeting, if an individual fails to appear in court in the general sense, and not speaking of COVID and special court arrangements, but in the general sense is that individual is issued a failure to appear notice, which is then followed by a failure to appear warrant if the case is not resolved inside of 30 days. One of the, and I'll say this very clearly, one of the most important principles is due process guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, and that is both notice and the opportunity to be heard. So as the presiding judge over code cases, one of the things that is always a critical concern for me is making sure that, first and foremost, Councilmember Amos actually got his citation. That is something that we are actively discussing in court with the prosecutors who are in my courtroom, as well as the officer who's issuing them, to make sure that we're having all of the necessary elements to hold individuals accountable when they don't appear, but most importantly for the judge to be able to see that this person did in fact receive this notice by personal service. That's not something that for a criminal citation, for instance, that you can just get by mail, because if Councilmember Amos doesn't get his mail and he gets arrested for something he didn't know about, that one instance in and of itself is a deprivation of rights. So going through first and foremost as a primary matter, making sure that we have all of the boxes checked to ensure that we can execute that process. What I'm expecting is the further we move away from COVID, the more that process will be solidified. I understand that during the COVID period, for instance, there was a decrease in wanting to face-to-face involve with people. That meant that there were a lot of citations that were placed in mailbox or left at the door. As we move forward, I know from talking to the officers that they are revamping some of the things that they were doing before. So we'll be able to issue warrants for individuals failing to appear. Now, that is the general setup. I still look at each individual case before I issue a warrant. And if I see that it is, for instance, a 76-year-old lady who is owner-occupied, I do take that into account. That is my province to take into account, and that's my decision, and I would stand on it whether or not in that particular case I issued a warrant or not. But there is a general procedure in place, but understand that I still look at cases case by case.
Thank you. Just clarification. So did I hear you say that in a housing code, citation must be given to the person directly, and in other citations can be mailed, but you can't mail the housing code? Sure.
I mean, if you know, to serve a business, for instance, can be accomplished by first-class mail. Mm-hmm. To hold an individual accountable by threat of, penal incarceration for failing to appear, you need to be personally served with the case.
That's state or city law?
That's the Constitution.
Constitution.
Yeah,
okay.
Big law.
You're in the process more than we are. So what if there's anything we can do to help you in the process? Because we talk about partnerships, talk to our colleagues in county, state, on up the line. Let me know. Whatever I can do to get both of us and the city and my residents where they want to be, please let me know.
I'll tell you, from my standpoint, and that being subject matter specific, I don't say this lightly. I mean it. It is just like this is an open forum. The courtroom is an open forum, and I encourage people, even council members, to come to the court sessions. I don't know anything about the cases other than what is put up before me, and I shouldn't. I don't do independent research on cases, on properties, because the law tells me that is inappropriate for me to do it. I base it off of what the presentation is in court. But when I have residents who are present, who are impacted, it goes a long way to hear exactly what's going on, because that information beyond the four corners of a citation are critical to being able to dispense justice and fairness. Absolutely.
All right, Ms. Norwood, then Mr. Lewis.
Chief Judge, there have been questions about the signature bond legislation that the council enacted, and that was before I came back on council. But I would like to get from you, if we could, as part of the Public Safety Committee and the Public Safety Chair here, any thoughts that you have on how that process could be delineated in a way that we don't include jaywalkers, but we do think about more serious offenses. And since y'all deal with those offenses on a day-to-day basis, I would be very grateful to get some information from you, and I know my colleagues on Public Safety Committee would as well. Is there anything that we can do that's appropriate and will help you in your meting out justice?
Absolutely, and willing to provide not only information but whatever insight that I can to do that. Obviously, the idea from us as a court system is to not over-penalize individuals. We were as welcoming as everyone else with the ideas of needing to reform archaic practices and a vestige that had not really been looked at, the bond system. But I think that as we have moved 4 years out, I think that there are some obvious gaps and places that we can all agree to work together to just make it stronger. Oftentimes when an individual is taken to the detention center, they're in a place where they're trying to identify a charge and a narrative on a citation to determine whether or not it falls within the realm of release or see a judge. Oftentimes, what's written as the charge may not be fully supported by the narrative. What may look like a basic instance of unrest may be something a little bit more akin, for instance, to harassment or battery or assault. So one of the issues that we do see with cases not only going through in custody, but as they come to the criminal division, is that the ability to make that discernment is not in the hands of the individuals who are best suited all the time to be able to do that. So I think that we've, as a starter, could maybe look at a broader range of not so much the actual charge, but the nexus of the conduct, and work to, even if it's just temporary, to make sure that certain individuals at least go in front of someone who's going to look at their record before they're just carte blanche released. From where I sit, having 14 years plus sitting as a judge, working in first appearance on both the misdemeanor and the felony level, conduct does flow up the ladder. It's very difficult to do something about the most egregious conduct when individuals have the impression that there is a certain level of basic conduct that there will be no personal accountability or repercussions for. So I think that there's some work to be done, but still in keeping with the spirit of what was accomplished back in 2018.
Great. I'd like to request that the chair allow the municipal court to come and present to us at one of our public safety meetings coming up. He just acknowledged that that issue, that invitation is officially issued, but we would like to take some time and hear what your and your court's recommendations might be.
Sure, and I think that, I'll even, extend or try to extend to bring with me some of, maybe the Chief of Corrections as well, because we've been working together over the past weeks to try to really shore up how to make it work, but also to make sure that we're taking a look at who is walking out and making sure we're not doing the wrong thing. So I'm happy to participate, information as well as insight on where we go from here.
Great. Thank you, sir.
All right, Mr. Lewis, and then I have a few, and then hopefully we can release the court on its own guidances.
Judge Portis, thank you for the work you've been doing. One thing I've noticed from you and from most departments that have come in here is that you've been understaffed for a while. And is that something that you've had to talk about in these meetings every year, or is that a new thing?
Well, I think that it is, as time has gone on, it's gotten to be multifaceted, because it's not just a funding piece. It is also an ability to compete with other governments and other private entities piece now. So that is directly weighing on not just our workforce, but probably every place else, I'll endeavor to say, but also the process by which you try to hire somebody once you have the resources is very interesting, to say the least. Oftentimes by the time we have selected a candidate, for instance, it's taken so long to get that person an offer and get them on board that they have found other employment.
Another bottleneck.
And that part, is it compounds the issue of resources with the layers that are required. I can only imagine, when we're hiring folks, I mean, usually it may be at most 20 at a time that we're trying to push forward. For the departments that do bulk hiring larger than that, I imagine that the process is even more difficult.
And you typically do. You said when you hire, you get 20 at a time.
I mean, that's the most at any
That's
given
the
time.
bottleneck that we've had. So since I got up here, the bottleneck that we found in the public work was the bulk hiring.
Yeah.
That's been the issue. They wait until they get a certain amount of applicants, then they interview at one time. So that's a bottleneck we need to attack in your area as well. It was taking up to 90 days for some people to get jobs, and they wanted to be the trash man.
Right.
And it was taking that long seriously, and they would find another job. And, you know, I got people right now who've applied in November for jobs. The moment I won, November 30th, the moment I won election, they applied for a job. And if they didn't apply in public works, because I didn't understand all of the processes, I didn't understand all the HR departments, and each department has almost their own hiring process. So if they weren't in public works, if they didn't apply in public works, I really didn't get them a job. And so now we're doubling back, going through other HR departments and finding this same bottleneck of this group hiring thing. And when to hear you complain, your complaints are very valid. And you're not even complaining. You're tightening your belt. You're standing up and you're defending yourself. But the thing I'm hearing is you're understaffed. And if you're understaffed by 50 people, you got 2 people in the office when you need 7. You're overworking them. We're not paying them enough. They're doing the work of 5 plus people. And that's an investment that the city needs to make in you. That's all I keep hearing from each department. An investment that the city needs to make in you. So I appreciate you for coming down here. I apologize for the stress you're going through hiring folks. You need some more money, and you need some more money to pay people, because you're competing with other governments around us. They ain't big enough. They ain't strong enough to compete with Atlanta. But Atlanta has to invest in Atlanta this time. And I think that's the issue we're having right now. Y'all nodding y'all heads. If you want some comments, you can comment back.
Well,
I agree.
These folks, these folks do the day-to-day management of all of that. I can honestly say that there's no job that any of our folks do, even on the most clerical level, that these 3 individuals have not personally done because of where we have been with the staffing. And these are actually licensed, trained professionals. I'm sitting next to a social worker to my right and 2 attorneys to my left, and there's no level of work in the administrative offices, front offices, from stuffing envelopes that these individuals have not had to do in the last 90 days because of where we are. It's not just the bulk, though. I mean, we have the same issues when we're trying to hire 1 to 3 people on the timing that it takes to move through the different layers of approvals to get somebody on board.
And one of their issues may be, I haven't even looked at what their issues may be with that portion. One of their issues may be they don't have enough people. And so we don't even want to just hamp on them. But the one thing we'll say, the city of Atlanta government did not grow the city. That's what I'm seeing since I got down here. I'm new. And that's what I've seen. It didn't take me 4 years. It won't take me 8 years to understand that we need to invest in our people. We need to invest in us, in our city. We can no longer compete and compare with New York. We're competing for the World Cup right now. We're competing. We want the World Cup. How can we get it and treat city workers the way we're treating them? The best job in the world growing up, everybody I knew with a high school diploma wanted to work for the city of Atlanta. I'm walking around right now. They don't want to work for the city. I'm giving people jobs, and I'm telling them we got to get you a raise to keep you. But I appreciate you. I hope we can keep y'all. I hope we can keep y'all.
Well, I'll make a commitment to you, Councilmember, and I appreciate your concern in that regard. Listen, the charter of this city, the only folks who authorize us to hire technically is this body. So if we continue to experience those bottlenecks, I'll let you know, and we'll move those positions through by resolution to get those folks hired.
Please do. I'm a champion for the labor. Thank you.
Sounds good.
All right, I'll limit myself to 2 questions in the interest of time, as we're now in the solicitor's space, as we like to say here. So you have ADA compliance work to do. Is that left over from the list from the federal audit of some years ago?
It came up in part because of some employees that we have that require ADA accommodation.
So this is a separate
Yes.
issue. Okay. Is there money in the budget to address that?
Well, not that has been added in, but we're hoping that as we move forward into the fiscal year, July 1st, that we're able to make those improvements. But, we'll see where we are at that time. I'll keep you posted.
Do you have a ballpark estimate?
It is, it's,
Less than 20,000.
yeah, I mean, it's a less than $20,000 outlay to do what we need to do to get it together.
Okay.
It's not big numbers.
How's your experience been with amnesties?
Well, the general perception anytime someone brings up amnesty is that there is a forbearance or a forgiving. What we have done with amnesties in the past that those that have been successful, we will run an amnesty program. We ran one last year, actually, before we really got kicked off with placing cases back in FTA status on the traffic side, where if you had a case in FTA status, all you had to do was show up. There would be no penalty for the FTA or the failing to appear. They're remotely successful depending on the case type. Usually, if there is some skin in the game, somebody's going to come in to take advantage of the amnesty. Amnesty on for instance, the housing was a big question. I mean, it doesn't drive anybody in for housing code, criminal cases, but for the traffic side, they'll come in to resolve a case for amnesty.
Last question regarding your various alternative or support programs and the people who matriculate through those. Are you seeing, what does the recidivism rate look like?
Well, first of all, you're not eligible to re-participate if you've gone through the program already. But in general, the recidivist rate for our alternative programming for traffic is about 40% or less. For the criminal cases, it's about 30% or less. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone with anything else? All right. Your Honors, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Solicitor's Office, you are up next. And they are on page 375.
No, that's what I meant.
Mr. Carter, how are you? Good to see you back here. I'm going to try not to bring up what I always bring up, but we'll see how salty I am in about 45 minutes. If you guys are ready, take it away. Do you have a handout?
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Shook, and hello to all members of the Finance Executive Committee. I am Raines Carter, City Solicitor, and we are honored to be able to do our budget presentation before you today. If we would, I think it would be more feasible to just go ahead and start on slide number 4. And in slide number 4, you see our FY23 authorized position count. As you can see, with regard to active and proposed, there's a difference there. And what we're trying to do is just make sure that our vacant, unfunded positions will be in a position to move forward. As you've heard from other departments, there have been serious difficulties with hiring for FY20, FY21. As we went into the pandemic, I thought that we would be getting more attorneys into government practice. Actually, the opposite happened. We had quite a transition of attorneys out of government practice into the private sector. And the legal market is such these days that you probably have seen the most recent articles where private firms are now hiring support staff directly out of college. They aren't even getting paralegal certificates now. So this has been engendered not just by the pandemic, but just by the overall change in the market. And so that explains the differences that you see with regard to our authorized position count. But I am happy to report that we are on the upswing in terms of our hiring. The 4 unfunded positions that you see for FY23 are actually 3 attorney positions and a public information officer position. And what we've been able to accomplish through the benevolence of the Department of Finance is to have that money pushed over into the extra help account so that we can make sure that we get those fully funded. And we're in the process of making those hires and going through the process as we speak. Our next slide is basically just our summary of current operations. Our primary areas in terms of operation of just the prosecution of general traffic, criminal, DUI, code enforcement cases, and more recently, nuisance abatement petitions. Of course, we have for years had diversion and alternative prosecution programs. That's a major work area for us. And then our specific code enforcement and community outreach. And what you'll see is a basic head count breakdown. Most of the resources are in the general prosecution and support area. There are about 62 positions that are allotted to that. In our diversion and special programs, those are 18 in our positions. In our code enforcement and outreach, we have 8 dedicated positions. And of course, we're always looking at our success rates with regard to all categories of cases. And as many people know, we do traffic, we do criminal, we do code enforcement. We also have cases that people don't think about every day, like false alarm cases that come before us, parking appeals that come before the court. So those are all tied into the metrics that we use for measuring our success. In terms of our diversion programs, as we know, the primary purpose of a diversion, of course, is to give people an opportunity to go forward with their lives, but it has historically generated revenue. That revenue has really dipped quite a bit because of the pandemic, because the primary driver of that, of course, was just the in-court appearance. But we are on the upswing now with people coming back into the court system, and we want to continue to be able to make sure that we make a contribution through the diversion fees that are imposed and collected for the general fund. Our next slide, of course, is just our basic proposed budget. And it's just like every other budget that you see with various city departments and agencies. It's primarily personnel and benefits. And, of course, the remainder are your general categories of contracted services, supplies, and other general types of financing. And so for a general proposed budget of $8.950 for FY23. Okay. As we move toward our metrics and our impacts for FY23, we certainly want to maintain the benchmarks that we've had over the years. This wasn't affected so much by the pandemic because our success rates in terms of prosecution have always been somewhere around 91 to 95%. So that did not change as much. With our special programs, of course, we're looking at trying to increase participation. We certainly expect that because of the lifting of the sheltering requirements that impacted us all during COVID. And we're going to continue to reach out with our non-traditional alternative prosecution methods to increase not only participation, but we're looking at increasing the revenue that goes along with that participation. Our code enforcement, nuisance abatement, and community outreach, we certainly hope that you're beginning to see the results of that. As you've heard earlier, there is now more staffing that is coming about in our code enforcement agencies, and so we are anticipating an increase in the number of code violation cases coming up, and so internally we're going to be shifting resources to meet those needs. We also are looking for as much success as possible in terms of our nuisance petitions. We have more recently forayed into the arena of temporary restraining orders that we receive from our Superior Court. We want to continue to do that. We're always looking to increase our engagement and our activities with our MPUs and to do as much community outreach as possible. We're engaging in various types of campaigns with the city administration, with many members of council, and with other agencies to give outreach to our communities with a focus upon the elderly and our youth. And we hope that we can continue to do that because we see that as not only educational, but we see that as a specific deterrence of crime. And we are exploring ways to more specifically and scientifically measure how we can have an impact on our crime rate. Our basic plan of operation is, of course, to commit our personnel resources to do that. We have no change in terms of our personnel count. We're just reallocating resources based upon the areas of need. We, of course, are very supportive of the administration's initiative to address nuisance properties in Atlanta. We applaud what Mayor Dickens and members of council are doing and the focus of attention that's being done with residential and commercial properties. We will continue our collaboration not only with APD, but with other law enforcement agencies that, of course, includes the Georgia State Patrol, the PAD program, to do our part in terms of sufficiently screening these cases to make sure that the charging decisions and the accusations are correct so that things are properly presented toward the court. And of course, our special programs go toward doing all that we can to resolve this. Our contractual agreements are standard. We're always looking for upticks in technology. We have talent recruitment working with us to try to help us in terms of our staffing needs. And our supplies are standard. Of course, we're going to be seeing more going toward litigation expenses, however, given our efforts with regard to not only nuisance abatement, but in REM, eminent domain, all of those things that you all have talked to us about, and that we want to make sure that we are able to help you do the things that you need to do. When I go to our summary of deliverables, as you can see, it's the same general areas, the prosecution of cases, and our whole thing is to enhance public safety. One of the things that I like to have someone to talk to you about for just a couple of minutes are some specific commitments that we've made with APD. As you may know, Cinco de Mayo kind of kicked off a DUI enforcement for APD. They were able to make a large number of arrests in a certain amount of time. We have some serious problems with DUI that pretty much fuel and engender some of these other issues, such as racing, reckless driving. I guess what I'm saying to you, these people are high. They're out doing these things, and so we have gotten with our agencies, and this past fiscal year we've done 2 specific DUI training, but we also want you to know that we have ongoing training that we do with the Atlanta Police Department as they rebuild and as they bring recruits in. And so I'd just like for Deputy Solicitor Andrew Taylor to talk to you for a couple of minutes about our efforts with regard to police training to have cases court ready for vigorous prosecution.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Great. Okay. Again, my name is Drew Taylor, and I've been working with the City of Atlanta Police Department training for quite some time now, several years. They asked me to come in and do training for police recruits, sometimes for more experienced officers, but mainly for police recruits. And I find it to be very helpful in terms of several different things. One is efficiency. And I tell the officers when they come in, I ask them to raise their hand and tell me, who is it that can't wait to go to trial? And all the hands are down like this. But I said, okay, if you don't want to go to trial, maybe what you could do is write a good ticket and write a good police report. So I explain to them and I show them how important it is to write a good ticket and write a good police report by taking an exercise they've already done with the police in writing a ticket, writing a police report, and we do direct examination, mock direct examination, and cross-examination. So they experience what it's like to be on trial, facing direct examination, cross-examination before we're dealing with actual real cases. And so with respect to the question of the citation, I'm able to, I tell them that you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And I want to give you this example of a charge, and I believe this will go to a question that you asked earlier, Councilperson. So the person was charged with a disorderly conduct, fighting words, and it just said 10681 and the subsection, and it didn't have any facts on it at all. Well, I looked on the police report, and what happened was the person came into the store, knocked stuff off the shelves, and threatened to come back and burn the place down. And so that, and it's all on video. So that's a felony terroristic threat. But it was charged as a city ordinance violation. And the only thing that was written on the citation was utter words which by their very nature tend to incite an immediate breach of the peace. Well, that's sufficient for us to keep them in jail, but it doesn't tell you what they did. But if you write on the ticket what it is the person did, then we can argue, well, Your Honor, this is why we need to keep this person in jail in terms of bond, and we can also argue, well, this is a case we either need to upgrade to the felony terroristic threat and send it over to the county, or we need to ask for the maximum jail on that type of charge. So I walk the officers through these type of scenarios to help them develop and understand the challenges with not having a good ticket, not having a good police report, and then I do exercises to help them be able to write a good ticket and to see things from the perspective of defendants and prosecutors and judges.
Thank you. Thank you, Drew.
Let me just note that we've been joined by Ms. Boone.
Okay. Our diversion and special programs, obviously, as I've stated before, there's a benefit to the city in terms of revenue, but there's also a benefit to our citizens because it allows people that are eligible, and by the way, these are first offenders. We do not deal with repeat offenders, to preserve their criminal histories and driving histories. And we also have set up a process that when a person makes a mistake, that we work with them with regard to record restriction so that they can put themselves in a position to be eligible for employment and other benefits that are given by government agencies. I now want to turn to Deputy Solicitor Erica Smith to talk to you about our nuisance abatement issue. I've said enough about code enforcement, community outreach, I think, and I hope you see the benefits there, but I think if we can just take a minute or two to explain what we're doing with our nuisance initiative, you can see how that ties into our budget process. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Deputy Solicitor Erica Smith, and I'm going to talk to you about...
Try that one.
Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. I'm Deputy Solicitor Erica Smith, and I want to talk to you about our nuisance abatement initiative and with our commercial properties as well with the mayor's initiative. The benefits to the city are obvious. It reduces crime, and we are proactively and aggressively committed to these properties.
Yeah. But for some reason, it's not working. Try the other mic.
Is this better yet? Okay. But that one wasn't working. Good morning. I'm Deputy Solicitor Erica Smith, and I want to talk to you about our nuisance abatement initiative, as well as the initiative that we're working with the mayor's office. And the benefits to this particular program are obvious. It reduces crime and also makes people get in compliance with their properties. To date, as Solicitor Carter has said, we have had over 90% success rate, but actually we have 100% success rate with our TROs, which are temporary restraining orders that we take through Superior Court. So right now, we have numerous properties, and Councilmember Norwood said that each council member was going to give us 5 more properties. We want to work with Judge Portis and Municipal Court to have more judges hear the cases. If you heard in his presentation, right now, he's the only judge that hears these cases. We would like more judges to hear them so we can bring more cases to Municipal Court. And I'm going to defer back to Mr. Carter.
And Vice Chair Shook, that is our presentation for today, and I am open for questions. I certainly would love to give you a report on the noise ordinance. I just miss it. Is that okay?
Well, I decided I was only going to ask you every other year about
okay.
that. But since
Thank you, sir.
At your invitation, if we have time. Mr. Hillis.
Vice Chair Shook, thank you, Solicitor Carter, and your great team. I want to hear more, of course, about the nuisance case and how we're going to improve on what we have already done. I know from the presentations to the Public Safety Committee that, we have had, I believe, 6 successful convictions. Is that correct? And even more on the list?
Actually, Councilmember Hillis. We've had more than that. What we've seen happen is when we tell the property owners and with these clubs and commercial buildings, when they know we're bringing action against them, we talk to the attorneys, and the attorneys want to either evict the property, the tenant from the property, or in the alternative, they're like, bring the action. Some of these properties that are on the list of 6, one of them we were bringing an action, and when I talked to the attorneys actually evicted the tenant. And that's one of the properties that was a club. So some of these properties, we didn't necessarily have to file on them because the actual owner brought in attorneys and they wanted to consent to an agreement or evict the current tenants. So we've been very successful in bringing our nuisance petitions, but we want to bring more.
All right, and on that point, I don't have the presentation in front of me, but how, I call it, I guess, your watch list of, I believe it was 70.
Yes.
Are you getting close to bringing any number of cases in front of either Superior or Municipal Court?
Well, again, something has to be very egregious to go to Superior Court. You have to have a high number of crimes, reported crimes, as well as something truly egregious, such as a homicide. And that's when we take it to Superior Court to get a temporary restraining order, because as I reported out in public safety, a temporary restraining order will close you down quicker than a nuisance action that's brought in municipal court.
Okay. And what, I see you have a run around over 10%, 12% increase in your budget. What in this budget helps you all expand those efforts as we go after these nuisance properties?
Most certainly. The Department of Finance was able to put that in the extra help line, and what we're going to be doing is moving those funds for those 3 attorney positions and the support staff positions. We are really working very hard to get a professional paralegal that will also assist us with the property types of issues that come up with these properties. So we're looking at commercial and residential. So those things have been put in place. And so my pledge to you is for us to see more vigorous enforcement in the area of nuisance cases. We want to make sure that people understand that we've got to work toward public safety, and we should be able to carry out our normal activities of going to the store, gas station, going to tourist attractions without that fear of establishments that foster these types of things. Now, establishments that are going to work with the mayor's program under the nightlife division, they'll have a friend in Raines Carter. But if they have made the decision that they're going to foster this culture of lawlessness, then I am a prosecutor, and I will prosecute them. So that's where I am on this issue.
Thank you for that. Another item, and I believe did a few of these, Solicitor Smith led, but when it comes to doing, I call them, hot spots, it's led by the Solicitor's Office. We take multiple city departments out. The Hollowell corridor comes to mind. Certain neighborhoods that have a high number of open and vacant properties, and just because, that's a whole other subject. Sometimes the public doesn't know who to call. They call it's all code enforcement, but it's really should be zoning enforcement, and this just takes care of that and puts the concentration on our really, really bad problem corridors and neighborhoods where people deserve to live in clean and safe neighborhoods, go to the store in clean and safe neighborhoods. So are we at a capacity now where we can, each council member can, request, one of their hotspot neighborhoods or corridors, and we can get the solicitor's office and our, whether they're in planning or code enforcement, the business license office, et cetera, to go out and first educate people and just give them notice. Sure. Unless it's a very egregious case and public health hazard, give them some time and then come back, and hopefully they have complied. But if not, we need to show them that this is not acceptable. So is that something the solicitor's office can commit to with the budget in front of us?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm so glad that you brought that issue up. Of course, those efforts, what we call our code collaborative issue, where we bring in the various departments departments and agencies, including some of our county agencies, especially where there may be some health department issues. We have reinstituted our code enforcement collaborative. We already have one that's going to be scheduled for a particular neighborhood that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So I will be in contact with you. Please send that information to us. We have reinstituted the collaborative. We have zoning, Bureau of Buildings, codes compliance, all of the various agencies, but we also have the help of some of our county agencies. So I really look forward to us doing that because we have a lot of work ahead of us that was kind of put back because of the pandemic.
Amen. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. And this is coming to all those who are able to enforce or levy fines, code enforcement. That same energy that we have taken with the nuisance properties around commercial and entertainment, if you cannot use the law now, how can we change the law to go after some of these vacant properties that's just sitting there that you take up the court? And I know the court is not, as our judge said, is not a generator of funds. I know sometimes we dismiss fines to bring about the correction of the property, but sometimes fines are the only things that are deterrents to others doing it, and or people that have done it will gladly pay our fines because I truly believe they are too low, but we as council will take care of that. They'll pay the fine and still leave the property where it is. So what can we do to take that same type of nuisance law energy and use it not against, but to bring better code enforcement actions for our communities?
One of the things that we're doing, Councilmember Amos, just like the training things that we describe with APD, we also have that scheduled for our enforcement agencies. One of the things that we're going to be talking to them about is making sure on the citation itself that they write more than just the charge, but exactly what happened. There's an area there for the narrative. Now, let me explain to you how that helps us. That helps us in a lot of ways. It helps us, first of all, to form the basis for a strenuous recommendation to the court. I have no hesitation whatsoever, based upon the egregiousness of the offense, to ask for a stiff penalty and or jail time, if warranted. So what we're going to do through these training sessions is actually start building the case there. By the time it gets to court, we're going to be in a position to make a strenuous recommendation with regard to the amount of fines. Now, one thing that we might be able to do, and we can take a look at this collaboratively, there's kind of a hodgepodge with our enforcement ordinances. Some of them have been updated, some of them have not. We need to go back and revisit some of the things that have mandatory fines because some of the mandatory fines are pretty low. And so I'd be willing to sit down with you and your office and with your colleagues to start reviewing some of those. I think that would help us get to where we need to be with regard to that. I'm so happy. I know Mr. Schick don't want me to do this, but we got a $1,000 fine on the noise ordinance case recently. So I'm so happy to let you know that we can do what you're saying.
Okay, thank you. And just a last comment, and I hope the Chief Judge and his team is listening. I just want to say thank you because your team, the Solicitor's Office, and our municipal court has really been one of love and compassion, but also has been tough as well. Our city is a different type of city, and we need to apply the law the same way, but also have love and compassion in there. And I definitely see through all of the outreach programs you do and things of that nature. So just want to say thank you and highlight the things that you and the courts do on behalf of our citizens of the city of Atlanta. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Moon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Carter and your team. You all have worked throughout the entire pandemic, clearing areas, the area at Lyndhurst and Martin Luther King, the Abbey Ridge Apartments. The MPU were able to work with your team members, Ms. Erica Smith, Mr. DeAnthony Parks, and Officer Character. That was a very difficult very, very difficult because we were dealing with the business owners that had relationships, but they were able to deal with the homeless in a way that was human, and we appreciate that. The chair of MPUI did send me a note, and she would like them to return to that spot again, but they did a heroic job in that. Also, I must commend you all on recently attending every single midnight basketball game, giving out information and resources for those folks that need help with the municipal court, code enforcement. I saw Mr. Bruce DeLay, Robert McGee, Mr. Abernathy. They have not missed any of those games. Also, recently, Ms. Carey brought scores of volunteers out to the Fairburn Road and Delmar Lane area, dealing with the cleanliness for the area. So for those efforts, we are really, really appreciative. Ms. Smith, your work with the Darren Village apartment complex, it is unbelievable how terrible some of our seniors are living. So, Ms. Smith, what is going on with Darren Village right now?
Right now, they're under an order. They're currently trying to get their demolition permit to demo Building A, the first building when you come in. They have an attorney that's been working with the Office of Building to get that done. I don't know if you've been over there lately, but it's a lot cleaner than what it used to be. They actually delivered some more dumpsters over there as well.
Okay, there's a request that we go unit by unit, and they are willing to assist the residents. The worst, starting with the worst, and that is on a top priority for the city of Atlanta to get the view at Harwell, the old Darren Village, cleaned up. And also, Mr. Carter, Sierra Ridge, thank you all so much. We will be cutting ribbon for those units soon. I just want to let you all know that you all have done a spectacular job on being out visible. Some places I don't even know, and I hear about the fact that you've been at the Commons, the old Allen Temple also. So again, thank you.
Ms. Norwood, and then Mr. Lewis.
I just want to request, and I know everybody is working to get rid of the worst, and I know that some of the council members did submit their 5 properties, but I would love to see a list of what we're taking. Let's have some umph in this. If we have 5 or 8 properties that are going to be forfeited, if we can get to that and say these, and looking at the history of some of these, I would think there'd be plenty of citations, plenty of documentation. Let's use the state's new code, and let's take them. If we take some of these and they go to the Land Bank Authority, and if we've got a problem with the Land Bank Authority, this council wants to know it, because we can now take those properties and we don't have to hold them for 20 years. So let's get some of these out of their hands. Some of the bad actors may not want to be good citizens in the communities in which their properties exist, but they don't want to lose that investment 100%. So I know that's not easy, but my request with your upcoming budget and year is that we have a wow, and that wow is you lose your property if you are egregiously awful to the communities that are in our city.
Most certainly. Based upon what you had already talked to us about, we are preparing a process with regard to the unoccupied commercial blighted properties. We're putting the criteria together for the Title 22 under the eminent domain. So you have been heard on this issue, and we'll be moving on it.
Yeah, I would hope that we focus on the build on the not residential spaces. My grandmother's property was a property that was fell under code because my family couldn't afford certain things. And my question is, because I know it wasn't offered to my family, and I know we asked numerous times. I had an aunt who was trying to fix the house up, went through the entire process of going through the court situation. How often do you offer funding, or do you have any funding to help residents fix their properties up to come up this code?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
We have a program called DEV, and that stands for Disabled, Elderly, and Veterans. We're living in a space now where people are being commercially harassed about their property. They're calling code on individuals so they can acquire their property because they can't fix it. Prior to the pandemic, we were working with housing, and housing had set aside monies for our department to help people with roofing, especially people who fell within that particular category. They was disabled, elderly, or veterans. So we were able to help over 20 people with that in our particular program with DEV. But we're now looking for resources and seeking out people that we can partner with that can help these people that are especially elderly, because they are focusing and being predators towards our elderly trying to get their property.
And they did it to us. I was just in a position to I went and purchased it back. We had a family, we had a person just calling code on us and then calling family members, threatening them that if you don't pay your taxes, we're going to own your property. And my wife, who's an attorney, she looked into it. She just so happens to be a real estate attorney. She looked into it, and I was forced to go and pay $9,000 total cash to get it back in that within a week. But we were able to get our property back, but some people aren't as fortunate. And my conversation is, how often do you offer that funding that you have? How often do you bring it up to them? Because they don't know to ask for it.
Well, if we look at the tickets, we have the tickets and we look at them, and if we can see what their age, or I ask if you have a veteran status, have you been through the military, and of course we can see if they're disabled, and we can also see what their age is. So we do offer the program to various people, especially if it's some low-level code enforcement violation, such as your yard needs to be cut or something of that nature, or if the property is open and vacant, we tell them how to get it boarded, and so on and so forth. So that's how we talk to people if we see that they're disabled, or we can see if they're elderly by reading the ticket and looking at their age, and also we ask if they have veteran status.
Yeah, and I'm extremely nervous about this because Atlanta is the one city in the world in which we had an opportunity to have wealth. I had an opportunity to have some wealth in a form of home ownership across the street from a golf course. That's been taken from a lot of my friends, and I know we've been very harsh on tearing down these properties, but we have one generation that messed up. We dealt with crack epidemic. We dealt with the red dogs in Atlanta. We're bouncing back from that. And so we have generations, we have families that are losing their wealth. These houses are going for $400,000 and $500,000 in my district right now. And we can't even live in them. So I would hope that we are asking folks before we tear down their properties. I would hope that we are not focusing on that when folks are calling code enforcement, reporting people, that we are more conscious of folks that can't afford, and we're offering that funding. We're offering it. Can I have a person who I can have direct in the office I can reach out to? Because I got a call every day from a person named Toya Daniels, who lives in District 1, actually, in Lakewood. But she calls me daily about some issues she's having at her roof, and I'm just trying to find resources. So if you can give me someone in your office I can contact, that'd be good for me as well.
Absolutely. I will give that to you. We have an investigator that's working with the commercial harassment process. She actually came to us from the police department. I will share this information with you personally.
All right, thank you.
At the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Solicitor Carter, thank you and your staff for the work that you do. I had the pleasure of working with you on one of the most recent closures, and so I'm extremely pleased to see that we were able to move that forward. My inquiry today is with respect to habitual and repeat offenders, and I'm referring to commercial property owners. is there a list or some type of report that would detail those ones that have been involved in multiple violations or shootings? I know that there's an aggressive effort surrounding nuisance complaints, and I'm just curious to see what the data is with respect to gas stations. I know recently, last evening, we had a situation at a Buckhead restaurant, and my concern is when you have these individuals that show up at these properties, it's almost a situation to whereas the commercial property owner is almost at the mercy of luck if something will happen on my property tonight. So I guess my question is, what is the list for habitual and repeat offenders, and what are the recommendations for those ones who do not feel that they have had the support of APD? And I'm referencing now nightlife specifically, but also gas station owners. And Lenox Mall is another example of another one who has had some challenges to no fault of their own, simply individuals who gather there. And so it's my understanding they have access to private security, whereas others may not throughout the city. So I'd love to see some type of data reflecting which facilities or addresses have been repeat offenders with respect to shootings and homicides. Thank you.
Well, I can answer you that question real quickly. If you're a habitual offender and you have that much crime on your property address, you will make the nuisance property listing, or we're going to get a TRO, go up to Superior Court and get a TRO if you have that much crime going on. And we do have commercial properties. We have gas stations. We have clubs, residential areas. We have apartment complex, all kind of properties that we're planning to bring nuisance actions against.
Perfect. And do you have a list of the top 10 or top 20 property owners?
Yes, I most certainly can forward that to you.
Thank you so much.
I've got a couple questions regarding your budget. Your line for salaries extra help is up, times 4 from prior year actual. Can you explain that?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay, your question, what was your question again?
Extra help line going from 100 to 400.
Yes, that is to cover those 4 vacant positions that were previously unfunded. Let's see, what is that for? That's really about it. Just those 4 vacant unfunded positions, and we feel that if we can have that funding, that we will be able to be fully staffed again with 88 full-time employees.
Okay.
And 3 of those are attorney positions.
Exactly.
So that's what leads to the amount. 3 of them are attorney positions.
Understood. And then I see one of your stated goals is to reduce recidivism. What's going to be the strategy there?
Okay.
Yes, one thing is to continue our focus on communicating to the officers what they need to do to give us the information that we need to know as early as possible what we're dealing with. But then also is to communicate the importance of focusing on penalties that are reasonably calculated to make sure that people don't ever engage in behavior again. So when you look at the sentencing theories, one sentencing theory is deterrence. Right, so this you're trying to give a penalty to keep people from doing something, to encourage them not to do it. The second one is rehabilitation, and then the third one is to look at incapacitation. So if you've seen that deterrence isn't working, and you've seen rehabilitation isn't working, very quickly you need to move to incapacitation. Because we know if you're in jail, you're not engaging in all of that activity. So those are the 3 things that we have to focus on in terms of sentencing theories, and we have the jail space to be able to effectively use incapacitation in the city. Now, it may not be the same at the county, but one of the things that is regularly done with new prosecutors as they come in is a systematic process of focusing them on understanding how to assess a case to make sure what is it that's reasonably calculated to make sure the person never again engages in this behavior. And then we work backwards to say, okay, maybe we can discount that plea if the person pleads early and takes some of the burden off of the court system in terms of the trials. But the focus is on making sure that we are correcting behavior and making sure that people don't ever again engage in this type of behavior.
Okay. Regarding your diversion program, and I understand no one gets a second bite at that apple, but as regards the population that has matriculated through that program, do you see in them a reduced recidivism rate?
Absolutely. In fact, we have some statistics on that we can provide for you, but we have to assess in terms of our goals for diversion, well, if this is not going to have the effect of causing this person to turn from this behavior, then why are we doing this? So we keep recidivism rates, and I will tell you that with regard to diversion, recidivism is very, very low. I can give you a figure, but it's very low because people that are given that opportunity, they're ready to move to the next stage, and they say, well, can I get an expungement or a restriction to get a job? So it works. It works.
All right. Well, that's good to hear, and thank you for your management of that program. We have a few minutes left, Mr. Carter, so go ahead and tell us about how wonderful the noise ordinance has become since you and I last had it on the operating table.
Thank you so much. It's good to be back. Since January of 2021 up through May of this year, this is a much better report from those 2 or 3 cases I gave you before. Now we're up to a total of 36 cases. Of those 36 cases, 17 of them have already been resolved, 15 with paid fines. The highest fine was $1,000. Most of the other fines average around $423. We had one person that was unable to pay, was sentenced to community service and received several hours of community service. We have 19 cases that are still open, that are set for trial. We have some trials that are going to be coming up during the summer. I'm going to make sure that I have my crack prosecutors like Mr. Taylor and others to enforce that ordinance. So I just want us to feel a little bit better about the efforts that we made to do that, because we had to really do some research, some digging. We had to get information from Athens. We had to get it through the law department. So I'm happy to be able to report on that.
Right. Happy to hear it's working, and sort of barriers to enforcement seem to be falling, and that some corrective action, hopefully behavior changing action is occurring. Others with questions or comments? All right, seeing none, that wraps up this segment of today's festivities, and we will resume.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And all right, I almost omitted the public defender's office, for which I apologize. I hope I'm not going to be in need of their services anytime soon. Is lunch ready in there?
This is the one that does not work. Take it, you can see right here, and then, oh, it doesn't matter. This one over there. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your patience. And if you're ready, you can introduce yourself, your team, and get us going on the presentation.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Days. I'm the Chief Public Defender and the Director for the Office of the Public Defender. To my immediate left is Deputy Director Dennis Collier. To my immediate right is Batika Strickland, our Operations Manager. And to her right is John Tapia, another one of our Deputy Directors. I'll start and try to be mindful of you guys' lunchtime as well. By going to slide 2, which is our office highlights, which essentially shows that we are and have been for the past 10 years or so. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. We have been, thank you, a client-centered holistic law practice. And so what that basically means is that in addition to the criminal case, we also devote specialized attention and resources to any collateral needs that a client may have that comes in front of us. And we do that through essentially 3 pillars. One is courtroom advocacy, the second being community outreach, and the third, access to programming, which can encompass anything that you can think of that may tend to stabilize a person's life, and that can be housing, employment, treatment for substance dependency, or anything else. This slide recognizes our organizational structure. We are comprised of just under 40 full-time employees, which consists of attorneys, client advocates, social workers, investigators, and of course, our very capable, supportive administrative staff. Our attorneys are operating in various areas, of course, code enforcement and housing, as was just talked about, which tends to be a very robust area of practice for our office, as is our DUI practice, which more or less takes up the most of our critical resources. The next slide shows the anticipated budget for FY23 and our position count as it currently is and as it was last fiscal year. For the past several years, our budget has been pretty stagnant. With the exception of last year. As you'll notice, the recommendation for this year is that our budget will see a decrease of approximately 2.5%, and that's primarily based on our unfortunate need for additional employees, particularly around our attorney staff. What we've had, the unfortunate cause of that has been if we, as we cycle someone through to be hired, we tend to lose someone. So our retention has been very steady over the years. We have an attrition rate usually of about 10% or less. In this past year, it's been considerably higher than that, and I think that is based on the market conditions and pretty much everything else that I'm sure most departments are going through as well. But as you can see, based on our employment count right now, we're at 37 active employees, 3 of which are vacant and funded, 6 of which are vacant and unfunded. Current operations, right now, I mentioned before, from our operational areas, we tend to have the biggest resource pool in our DUI division and in our code enforcement and housing division, and that's primarily because of the nature of those cases. It just takes a lot to represent those cases. They tend to last a lot longer, and it
there's a lot of resources that have to go into that and a lot of training that's necessary for an attorney to operate in that spectrum. Right now, and as has been the case for several years, our office handles probably more DUI defense cases than any other attorney office in the state of Georgia. Right now we have more than 1,000, a little bit over 1,000 active cases. That's not unusual for us. In even a pre-pandemic year, we were operating in the neighborhood of 800 to 1,200 active cases for our DUI division. So it's an incredible resource pool on our staff because there's usually only no more than 3 or 4 attorneys assigned to that division. And when you also have a resource pool for a court like housing and code compliance, and also the necessity to staff traffic cases and the in custody cases, it becomes pretty laborious for our staff, as well as our social workers and client advocates that support that work. Our proposed budget, as is represented here, is a little bit over $4 million this year. One of the key components to this that we're proud to make mention of is we have a capital expenditure request of approximately $50,000, and that would be for an additional vehicle in our office. Currently, we have one vehicle that is utilized for almost anything you can think of. We do a lot of community outreach. That vehicle right now currently doesn't have enough space to carry people and materials that we may need when we go to present. It's a small van, but if you try to utilize the trunk space isn't there, so we are often having to utilize our personal vehicles when we're going more or less off-site. And a lot of our operations don't just consist of the courtroom. Of course, we're in the office, we're in the jail a lot, we're in the community a lot, and we're also, of course, in the courtroom. So the vehicle gets a lot of use. About a couple of months ago, we recognized the need for another vehicle when our vehicle was in need of recommended repairs, and it was down for about 3 or 4 weeks, and that presented a significant challenge. So that's one of the requests that we've made, is to purchase at least one other vehicle so that we can transport clients to community service, and we can get to those outreach locations with our appropriate materials in an efficient manner. Some of our key programming here. Again, I've mentioned some of our DUI defense needs. And again, we've had some significant turnover in that space just because of the amount of volume and the attractiveness of some of the staff that we've had based on the training and experience that they have. The same goes true for our housing and code compliance. One of the things that we will request, I think, relative to code compliance that we see as a anticipated need is perhaps directed funding that could go to some anti-displacement issues. Many of our clients that we see from this court tend to be legacy residents, and again, I was just hearing a lot of the questions that the council was posing today to the solicitor's office. Many of the people that you all are speaking about are our clients, and if we had more funding related to anti-displacement for those individuals, I think it would help us in many ways, most significantly in hiring attorney staff that is proficient in both title standards and probate work. It's very difficult to counsel a legacy resident that is being approached by investors in some ways legitimate, in some ways very much illegitimate and illegal, when they don't understand the process of how do they gain ownership in that property. Use it through the probate process, but that again gets to be another area that's difficult to navigate, and we just don't have the capacity right now. Even though we know that that's a very easy solution, we just don't have the capacity to make that work. So those are the kind of things where additional staffing goes a long way to counteract some of the it'll make solutions for some of the problems that I think we all want to solve. And of course, same goes true for our first appearance calendars. There is a 6-day court that is operating effectively, and to staff a weekend calendar gets to be very difficult. You can have anywhere from 5 to 105 defendants on a weekend, and we don't know who's going to be arrested, so we always have to anticipate on the larger end to make sure we're appropriately staffed for a weekend. That's one of the unfortunate things about this work is you don't know who's going to walk in the door, and so we always have to more or less be proactive in our resources to anticipate and be effective for whatever situation occurs. On this slide highlights our strategies for our operations. Again, we've had greater resource pool than we'd like, primarily from our attorney staff, and some of which has come from our senior investigators. I am fortunate to sit on the American Council of Chief Defenders, and that's about 15 of us nationwide who look at some of these issues that surround public defense offices and try to come up with ways to resolve them. Oftentimes on that council, I'm the only voice for a municipality or a low-level offense office, if you will, that is handling primarily misdemeanors. But we're having some of the same issues that other offices nationwide are having. And one of the things that we've seen that has worked is simply throwing money at this problem. We are competing with private law firms for talent. We're competing in a lot of respects for other city agencies. We're competing with the law department. We're competing with the solicitor's office. We're competing with the court for talent. So for us, again, we need to have that specialized training because all of our attorneys are litigators. That presents in one way an attractiveness to our office, but in other ways, everybody does not want to do that work and be prepared to today do a housing case and tomorrow do a DUI and the next day handle a city ordinance violation. So you have to really be multidisciplined, multifaceted, and I applaud our staff for having done this so long, so well. But of course, this is an issue that I think what we are going to do this year is implement strategies to increase salaries and look for ways to increase some of the pay scales to try to counteract some of the stop the bleeding, if you will, on our resource pool. Our last slide shows some of our intended objectives, and that is, one, to continue to provide comprehensive client-centered defense. Secondly, to follow national standards in resolving those collateral issues that tend to lower recidivism and both stabilize the community at the same time. And thirdly, to resume our robust activities in the community outreach space, which proactive solutions, evidence-based, they work. And so we will continue to do those things to, again, make for a stable city of Atlanta. And I'll take any questions that we may be able to answer for you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Public Defender Days. What is the total amount, or looking at the total amount of municipal court cases, what percentage of those cases utilize the public defender's services?
In past years, it has usually tended to trend upwards of 10%. But when you're talking about a court that is the highest volume court in the Southeast, 10% is about 25 to 30,000 cases. The pandemic actually helped us in one respect, and that was because the case counts were so much lower than normal. We got an opportunity to actually see what it's like to operate on a recommended case count basis. So the caseloads that we always have strive for from an attorney's caseload per year, the recommended caseloads by every outfit that measure those and says if you're doing municipal misdemeanor level cases, this should be your case count. We finally got to see what that was like, and I've been at the office 13 years now, and this was the first time we were able to recognize that. And you can, in doing so, you can really see where your resources need to be. But again, I'm a little reticent to stand on those laurels of saying, oh, we've been doing a great job the past 2 years, because what we do know is as we come out of the pandemic, those case counts are going to go back up and our appointments are going to go back up to those same type of levels. And I don't know that, again, we're going to have the capacity to continue to operate at this optimum space where we've realized the things that we need. We've realized where our resources need to be placed, and we've changed a lot of our procedures. It will be a push to see if those things can remain. I think it'd be very easy for me to just sort of ask for a finite amount here now and say, well, this amount of dollar will do that. That's tough as well because, again, we don't know what's going to come in the door 6 months from now or even by next year. And a lot of times we're operating in a space where we're having to respond if the court changes a process or a procedure or adds a judge or increases the number of operational times for courtrooms, then we have to respond to that in kind, and we don't always have the resources to do so. But again, it's sort of a wasteful thing to have people on the ready and not actively working. And there's enough work to go around, but we're trying to be measured in our request of saying let's increase little bit by little bit because we sort of know that the volume is going to happen.
Your FTEs, you state you have 37 active. How many of those are attorneys?
Approximately 25 are attorneys. Right now, 23 are attorneys. 23? 23.
Okay. And your 3 vacancies that are funded, how many are there any attorneys in that pot?
Those are all attorney positions.
Okay. And then the vacant but unfunded, how many attorneys are in that pot?
Those are
That's 6.
5 attorneys and 1 support.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day, for the presentation. Quick question. Looking at your work around housing court and code compliance, I've had conversations with, legacy long-term residents as well as seniors who have seen where, they've been in their neighborhoods for a long time. Right. They've got new residents that come in and are using code enforcement as a tool to try to make them be compliant with certain things that they see they need to happen in their neighborhood. Where do you all get involved in the process and being able to help defend some of these seniors that are dealing with some of these code compliant issues?
Well, when those folks are issued a citation and they come to court, typically those legacy residents are going to meet the income requirement, because what we found is most of those people that fit that scenario, they're limited income. So we're appointed by the court to those cases, and then we begin the process of representation. Now, we're fortunate in that because we are a holistic office, we don't just look at that citation and say, oh, it's a roof that has an issue, or it's a grass needing to be cut. In some of those instances, what you'll find is that our staff will actually go out. We've had, if it's peeling paint or grass that needs to be cut, I can't tell you the number of times we've put lawnmowers in the back of our cars and put them in the trunk, and we go over to that house and cut the grass and come back and say, look, this house is now in compliance. In fact, we were the one that put it in compliance, and that should resolve this issue. So some of this we've done self-help just because that's the easiest and most effective way. But that's the bulk of our caseload in that court is our legacy residents. And so that's why we want to establish these mechanisms to be proactive, because we're constantly at the NPU meetings to talk about this, because I know this is a big problem in the NPU meetings, is, well, what do we do about these problem properties? And some of these, especially on the residential side, usually it's income-based. And the way the city code is written, most of those residential properties are going to ask the question, is this person the owner? Is this person the person occupying the property, or are they the operator? And so if you meet one of those criteria, then you can be effectively charged. Well, in a lot of instances, somebody may be the person that's occupying the house, but on title, they may not be the owner. What we want to do is bridge that gap, and that's why I mentioned having staffing that can help people navigate probate court or navigate the title standards. In a past life, I was a real estate attorney, so I kind of understand the need to advise people on this is how this is what you can do to put a deed together that will transfer the ownership from this person to this person. But a lot of times it's just a matter of going to probate court and having that appropriate person. This was the grandmother's property. How do you get it back to the kids now, even though they've been living there for 30 years? Well, this is how you do it. But that process is a very difficult thing to navigate, particularly with somebody with little means. And going to a private counsel to say, can you go to probate court with me, that's a significant legal bill.
Sure.
And so we want to be helpful in that, because that is an instant solution to give that legacy resident instant equity in that property. And then they can make the decision, do you want to sell that property for a market rate without the stress of having an investor hold this over your head, or you can refinance that property and make whatever needed repairs are and stay there. So these are solutions that we want to be able to implement in a very easy way, through our own office, without having to bring in all of these other resources and have these properties, because this is something we can proactively do. Mm-hmm. We're in the community weekly doing legal clinics now. So this is one of those instances where I'd love to be able to give that advice to people at a legal clinic and say, well, come out this weekend. We do that now with suspended driver's license. If you have a suspension on your driver's license, we tell you to come and see us, and we'll walk you through that process, because, again, another hard process that is cost prohibitive for you if you are on limited income to go to an attorney and ask for those services. So these are solutions. So how can we keep people from being arrested for suspended license and get them to work? We do a driver's license restoration. How can we keep property in legacy residences' hands, help them cycle through the probate process?
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I just commend you for your work and going above and beyond and helping some of these legacy residents. I think I speak for some of my colleagues when I say, feel free and make sure you lean on us for some of that work as well. If you find yourself in instances where you need to do some of that outreach, I know I'm willing to help in my district, and I'm sure a lot of my colleagues are willing to do the same. And so, let us know how we can support you, both physically as well as financially,
absolutely
take the budget to look at how we can be creative about helping some of our legacy residents. So
yes, thank
you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that I was contacted several years ago running for whichever time I was running, by the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. And they're right there in Peachtree Center. So are y'all able to access them to be helpful in some of the things that Mr. Winston and others have brought up?
Yes, as a matter of fact, right now we're in talks with them. We were fortunate that this body approved for us to partner with an organization. As of last December, the legislation was approved for us to do eviction defense alongside a nonprofit organization. And AVLF, as you mentioned, is the largest actor in that space from a metro standpoint. So we've been in active conversations about how do we build out a process where we can help people through them, because they're inundated. I mean, if every attorney in the bar went there, they probably still wouldn't have enough help to deal with the number of cases. But that legislation has actually been very helpful to us in the short run, because we've been able to instantly advise clients where we haven't had that authority before on what they need to do to stay in some of those homes. A lot of these districts, as you know, are very renter heavy, and as economic development goes, so these evictions tend to increase, and a lot of times these issues can be resolved by a phone call to a landlord, or even with us speaking as the attorney of record and not having to sort of send them to an organization to resolve the problem, we can usually get a solution very quickly. But yes, we are working directly with ABLF right now.
Well, and the reason I didn't know about it is I wasn't on council in December. But I'm delighted that y'all are working with them, because I think I was impressed with the breadth of, and the knowledge base that they had. So
Yes,
good.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Amos, go ahead.
Yes, sir. You got my brain thinking, but I want to know about this budget and to address your strategies for FY23. Very quickly, you say you lost 8 key employees, you onboarded 6, and you still have 9 vacancies?
Yeah, so that tends to be our issue, and that has been the same issue in other years. This year is just exacerbated. So as we're usually trying to onboard, we tend to lose somebody. So there gets to be this sort of zero-sum game for us. We never can fully get to what I would call the bench of attorneys, where if somebody's sick or out, let me go back. We realized this was a significant issue, and a few years ago we ended up with, I think, 5 of our attorneys were on maternity leave at the same time, and it presented a significant problem, as you can understand. And so we said, well, going forward, what we need to plan for is to have more rather than having a specific job for every attorney, we need people who can kind of come in and be cross-trained more than we're already doing. And we need more people available, so that if we have multiple maternity leaves or we have vacancies through resignations, then we have people already there and adequately trained to fill those slots. So that's what we've been trying to work towards. But right now, I think the market has just made that more difficult. It's made it more difficult from a salary standpoint and just an opportunity standpoint. So
the most, and not to cut you off, the more pressing question is, because I was concerned immediately when I seen the Public Defender's Office budget decreasing. So that concerned me right off the bat. Will this budget that you're proposing in front of us now give you the opportunity to bring on those 9 people, or it keeps you where you are now? Or because say if you get an influx of people that's loving and caring and want to join the Public Defender's Office, will you have an opportunity to fill your vacancies in this budget you're proposing?
Right now, I think if we were able to fulfill those 3 positions, yes. But here's the thing. Again, we always try to be fiscally responsible, and we don't want to. And I understand it. It's the position we just happen to find ourselves in. And I don't want more people on staff than our staffing requirements are. Now, I can anecdotally say all day, I pretty much can see into the future and tell you what next year is going to look like, or next January, next February, what our staffing needs may be. But that's not guaranteed, because, again, who could have predicted that we would have been in a pandemic, and we were anticipating already what our needs would be. But I guess what I can tell you is it's very likely that in the second quarter of this year, I may be coming to you to say, we need emergency funding now to fund these unfunded positions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate y'all's candor and sort of alerting us as to the coming predicted needs, and your candor in acknowledging that as of right now, you can get by.
Yes.
But I think we all know that's going to change. The question is when and what's going to be the rate of the change.
Right.
In terms of who, should be making what, I guess you're going to be, stuck like a lot of people in waiting for the pay and class results. In terms of revenue to assist in the provision of various support programs, are you getting any grant dollars?
Most of our funding for some of our programming is usually just donated. It's our activity in the community, third-party service providers, faith-based organizations recognize the work that we do on a consistent level, and usually we can pick up the phone, because we just haven't had access to grant funding in that way. There are just not a lot of grants that are written that we can tap into for that specific thing. We have had some grant funding in the past for some programming, but I think for what you're describing, that has usually primarily just been donated from other organizations or other entities. If we say we need food, clothes, MARTA cards, what have you, it's been donated from outside sources that are just familiar with our ongoing work.
All right. Well, I would just say that if you are aware of other grant opportunities that are out there, and if you lack, the capacity to, have someone knowledgeable aggressively pursuing them, I'm sure that's going to be something we would pay attention to.
We appreciate that.
All right. Thank you, really, for everything you do. Colleagues, we're pushing law back to 1:15, so that gives us a little time to grab lunch and do about 4 days' worth of office work. Thank you.